Sometimes it feels like we're not making very much progress on our layouts. That's why it's important to review our progress from time to time and why I want to show you what I did on my layout during 2019. That's coming up right now. I'm Roy Smith. Thank you for joining me in my last update for 2019. In it, I'd like to share with you the progress I've made this year. In fact, that's what we do on this channel. We share the amazing hobby of model railroading. So if you enjoy model railroading, then I encourage you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done it, and to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. Be sure to join me on Tuesday nights for Dispatch, the weekly variety show for model railroaders, and on Saturday mornings for layout updates. Now, when we review our progress as we're going to do today, we often discover that we've actually made more progress than we thought we did. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at what I've done on my layout this year. In late 2018, I had already begun to work on some shallow 3D scenery along the Pocatello subdivision on my layout. And at the beginning of 2019, I finished it. I used 1/4 inch thick sheets of white styrofoam to create the shallow 3D scenery. It had to be very shallow to fit the narrow space between the track and the backdrop. In doing this scenery, I tried to replicate this scene along the prototype near Inkom, Idaho. Here's that styrofoam which I cut and carved to replicate the prototype. At the same time, I attached a photo backdrop and some 3D scenery to the scenic divider in this area. Trains pass through this hole in the scenic divider to reach Granger and the Evanston subdivision on the other side of the divider. I like to use photos of the prototype when trying to replicate the area that I'm modeling. Here's an example of such a photo taken along Interstate 15 in southeastern Idaho. The photo you just saw helped me to create this scene. I wanted to fill this space with terrain. As I so often do, I used layers of white styrofoam covered with spackling paste to create the terrain feature that now appears here. As you will recall, I created the scenery for Echo Canyon, Utah, using this same technique. I created Echo Canyon over the course of 15 episodes in 2018, and in early 2019, I shared a complete review of this project with you. This is what Echo Canyon looks like now, but believe it or not, it's not really finished. I still have to add trees and other vegetation along Echo Creek, and I still have to paint and ballast the track. This is the best spot for rail fanning, both on the prototype and on my layout. In February 2019, I posted the first ever episode of Dispatch. Dispatch is a weekly variety show for model railroaders, which I publish on Tuesday nights. Just a few days ago, I uploaded episode number 37. During 2019, I opened up the fascia on the Eastern Helix. I call it the Eastern Helix because it takes eastbound trains down to tracks in staging representing Cheyenne and points east. Until I opened up the fascia, I had trouble accessing the track in the helix to fix derailments, and I certainly had trouble seeing trains in the helix. I removed the fascia as the first step in opening up the helix. I subsequently cut windows in the fascia and put the fascia back on the layout. Now I have much better access to the helix. And I now believe that it is not necessary to hide our helices behind fascia or scenery. I also made the top of White Mountain removable for additional access to the helix from above. This is what the helix looks like inside when the top of White Mountain is removed, and the top in place. Later on, I repaired the damage I caused to the terrain when I was removing the mountaintop. During 2019, I had a carpenter change the door to my train room, making it swing out into the hallway instead of into the train room. As a result, I could now build a lift-up bridge at the entrance to my train room to connect the White Mountain area of my layout with the Pocatello area. Here you see the track arrangement on the lift-up bridge. The bridge remains in the up position when I'm not running trains, making it easy to go in and out of the train room. I subsequently modified the track arrangement a bit to remove that crossover. Adding this lift-up bridge to my layout allows me to do two things I couldn't do before. First, it allows me to run trains in a continuous loop on the upper level of the layout without them disappearing in the helices or staging. And second, it allows me to run trains beyond Pocatello down the helix to staging tracks representing Portland, Oregon. In May, I traveled to Steamtown in Scranton, Pennsylvania for a weekend during which I was able to meet up with some 80 or so of you in a big get-together of model railroaders. This event was organized by Sparky 107. It was tons of fun to hang out with so many friends in the hobby. We all went over to visit the Hudson Model Railroad Club during the Steamtown weekend. In fact, I visited a number of club and home layouts during my 2 trips to the States during 2019. 2 weeks after the Steamtown event, I traveled to Strasburg, Pennsylvania. Strasburg has a number of railroad and model railroad attractions. I mention this because our next big get-together of model railroaders will be held in Strasburg on May 16th and 17th, 2020, and I would love to see you there. I will put the link to a video down below which describes those attractions. Back on my layout, I began to install NCE switchcats in my staging yard during 2019. These switchcats allow me to throw my turnouts in staging remotely rather than manually. The switchcats will make operations in staging much easier when I get around to installing the rest of them. I showed you how the staging yard functions. In 2019, I also began to speed match my diesels using a circle of track and JMRI. Speed matching my diesels allows me to run them better in multiple unit consists. Eventually, I will get around to speed matching the rest of them. And here are 2 of them now, running in consist on my layout. The big project I am now working on is the renovation of the Evanston and Granger area of my layout. This is what it looked like before I began to renovate it. The Western Helix is located under this area of my layout. It takes westbound trains down to Ogden, Utah and points west. I began this renovation by rearranging the track at Evanston in a way which is now much more functional and satisfying. I use Cato Unitrack on my layout. It's easy to rearrange the track when you use Cato Unitrack. After rearranging the track at Evanston, I turned to the Granger area and began to work on hiding the hole through the scenic backdrop here. Once again, I used stacked up layers of white styrofoam as a scenery base. I added a hill so that the highway overpass seems to disappear into the backdrop behind the hill. I covered the hill with spackling paste and then carved terrain features and rock formations into it. The renovation of the Evanston and Granger area of my layout will continue in 2020, and I hope you will come along as I do it right here on this channel. I'm so glad you could join me for this review of my progress during 2019. But the fun continues. Just click over here to watch more videos. I'm Roy Smith. Until next time, happy railroading.